Legally Blonde. You know it, you probably love it. I, for one, was absolutely obsessed with this movie as a kid. I mean, I watched it almost every night on repeat when I was 10 years old on my little VHS TV, which is probably why I was able to just write this video from memory rather than consulting the source material. So if there's any factual errors, just blame my 10-year-old tiny brain. Legally Blonde, released in 2001, is based off of a book by the same title by Amanda Brown, who wrote the book after her own experiences at Stanford Law School. Legally Blonde was widely popular and has been referenced time and time again in the decades since its release. Legally Blonde spawned several sequels. Legally Blonde, Red, White, and Blonde, Legally Blondes, and perhaps most importantly, Legally Blonde, the musical. I'm going to talk more in depth later about this, but the musical made important changes that really elevated the plot to higher heights for me. Anyway, for those who need a quick refresher on the concept of the movie, Elle Woods is president of her sorority Delta Nu at her college in Los Angeles. She's getting ready for the rest of her life, waiting for her boyfriend Warner Huntington III to propose to her. Instead, on what she thinks is their proposal date, Warner breaks up with Elle, naming the fact that she's not serious, aka she doesn't appear smart enough for his political aspirations. Gobsmacked, heartbroken, and unwilling to give up on him, Elle decides that she has to prove that she's serious by going to the same law school as Warner, which just happens to be Harvard Law. She does this only to discover that not only has Warner found a new girlfriend, Vivian Kensington, he's proposed to her. Woo! Hilarious hijinks ensue as Elle makes her way as the traditionally feminine and sexualized woman in the cold, dark halls of Harvard Law. Legally Blonde is loved for many reasons. Elle's self-discovery, her achievements, the fashion, bruiser, the list goes on. It's kind of categorized as a romantic comedy of sorts, but like its main character, Legally Blonde is deceptively meaningful. At first glance, it registers as kind of superficial, but it manages to subvert expectations to deliver a message of self-actualization. Despite its rom-com categorization, I actually don't think Legally Blonde is much of a rom-com at all. If anything, I actually think it's kind of a love letter to female friendship, or gal pals as we like to call them. From the very beginning, we have strong examples of female camaraderie and support. Elle's sorority sisters and later Brooke Wyndham serve as Elle's launchpad and support system. Though difficult at first, her relationships with both Vivian and Professor Stromwell motivate and propel her to success. And Paulette, of course, is Elle's confidant and gives her the first opportunity to really believe in herself. Conversely, the male characters kind of fall into the background in terms of helping Elle. The only positive things Callahan and Warner manage to do are kicking Elle into gear. Emmett, in the movie at least, is sweet and calm, but ultimately their romance isn't really the focus of the movie. Legally Blonde teaches us to be ourselves, to push boundaries, but also that healthy, strong friendships can truly be a foundational guiding force in life. Elle's sorority, Delta Nu, obviously plays a huge part in her journey as a character. What I love about Legally Blonde's depiction of sorority is that it's actually her source of strength, encouragement, and community. Her sorority sisters never once discourage her from applying to Harvard Law. Instead, they're helping her study, celebrating her success, and supporting her in whatever ways they can when she's away. Don't get me wrong, I never joined a sorority in college, but I did go to an all-girls school for 8 years, which, despite my inexperience with Greek life, I think would bear some similarity. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that every sorority or girls' school experience is the same as Elle's. It's definitely more of an idealized version of the Greek life experience, again, assuming. My own girls' school experience was quite the contrary. However, I noticed that as the years pass and I run into my old schoolmates, there's a camaraderie that can only be explained by that shared kooky experience at our bizarre school. While it might not be the same kind of cheerleading we see in Legally Blonde the musical, there's a sense that these people are on your team, quietly rooting for you from afar. In the movie, the sorority sisters are mostly concentrated in the first maybe quarter of the movie. Again, 10-year-old memory. But they pop up here and there. In the musical, the sorority sisters take the form of the aptly named Greek chorus and try to give Elle advice like, keep it not the best, most sisterly advice, but makes you laugh. Sorority is not coincidentally the thing that gives Elle an edge in her internship. When Brooke Wyndham is revealed as the client, Elle instantly perks up and explains how they know each other. Everyone kind of just scoffs at her, but Elle is able to use her sorority connection with Brooke to build a closer relationship. Brooke only gives her the alibi because of this sort of established trust between them through that organization. In the musical, Brooke and Elle have a very sweet moment where they just sing this little Delta Nu song together, and it instantly puts Brooke at ease with Elle. From my own experience in a girls' school and my, albeit limited, understanding of sororities, there is a network of women out there who will pull strings and help you out with your career or kind of anything just by virtue of that shared organizational experience. Brooke gives Elle a chance to truly shine in the courtroom. Even if it is an unrealistic depiction of what a courtroom is really like, it is a great depiction of how a network of sisters can uplift one another. Does saying this publicly give me war flashbacks to my cultish high school? Yeah, it sure does. Anyway, the sorority element of Legally Blonde is representative of the kind of camaraderie that springs out of a all-women's organization. It's such a specific experience, and it's nice to see it depicted in a wholesome way. When I think about sororities in film, I usually think of the more catty depictions where women are just warring over some generic frat boy or something else fairly superficial. While pretending that these organizations are perfect and fun might be a little naive, Legally Blonde is refreshing in its unabashed positivity. I also want to include Paulette in this section because she's obviously a huge part of Elle's perseverance at Harvard. Paulette is Elle's East Coast support system. Since Elle's sorority girls don't move out there with her, she needs somebody else to fill the role. And that's Paulette. Paulette never questions Elle's abilities. She's instantly impressed and supportive. They both hype each other up, and Paulette actually gives Elle the opportunity to just pretend to be a lawyer to get Paulette's dog back.
I'm taking the dog, dumbass.
Was that good? While it's risky, Dewey sucks and is none the wiser, so who cares? Paulette is used primarily as a source of comic relief throughout the movie, but she's probably the most supportive out of anybody in the entire movie. Maybe even the girls from Delta Nu. But it's not a competition, let's be honest. She also gives Elle an opportunity to express herself comfortably. As I'll discuss in a moment, Elle doesn't even feel comfortable on the East Coast for a while. Paulette is the only person besides Emmett, who makes an effort to let her be herself, without judgment. Elle also gets the added fun of helping Paul snatch up her UPS mans. Paulette essentially offers Elle respite from the stress of law school, and also the stress of being stifled as a person. However, not all the experiences with other women are particularly positive in the beginning. Elle's experiences with Vivian and Stromwell prove to be a little more prickly than the other women in Legally Blonde, but they ultimately become the strongest motivating force in her pursuit of a law degree. Vivian and Elle both evaluate each other physically, mentally, and essentially sexually. At first, they're evaluating each other on the basis of their individual relationships with Warner, under the assumption that Warner is, in fact, a good guy. He's not. Elle is jealous that Vivian got the ring, and Vivian looks at Elle as her competition. Vivian resorts to immature pranks to get Elle to look bad publicly, and Elle has a rare moment of real cattiness towards her. Vivian looks down on Elle, essentially believing that she isn't intelligent and doesn't belong at Harvard. Elle views Vivian as a stuck-up and ill-dressed bitch. But all this cattiness, like I said, comes from the place of a fierce, almost primal urge to be with Warner Huntington III, the final boss of annoying rich white boys. I mean, seriously, for a second, imagine being married to the guy. He seems like the kind of man to tell you need to lose weight after giving birth to his child. What's Elle's most baffling skill? Liking this fucker enough that she changes her entire life just to prove a point to him. I also want to include Stromwell in this section because I think we can all relate to her relationship with Elle. I know I've had one or two intimidating professional women make me feel a little bit inadequate. Stromwell isn't a main character, but she serves as an example of what Elle could be if she succeeds in law. Stromwell and Vivian humiliate Elle together because it's fun, and we love doing that to other people. And it just makes Elle feel bitterly towards the whole experience of going to Harvard. There's something about being belittled by another woman that can just hit a teensy bit harder. I know the feeling. It makes you just want to slink away. And what ends up happening often is this. Hypothetically, say I got belittled in the same way as Elle. I end up making my way in law and becoming a professor myself, only to perpetuate the same belittlement onto another woman later on. That woman makes it in law, she becomes a professor, she starts belittling other people too. And so the cycle continues. It happens a lot in various different professions. It actually even happened when I was kind of a theater kid in high school. I just remember the seniors really hating the underclassmen and kind of making us pay our dues. It's so bizarre to me. Elle, I think, is someone who wouldn't perpetuate that cycle, but it does call into question why a certain kind of verbal humiliation is allowed and even welcomed in those circles as a rite of passage. To weed out the weak? Is it worth the humiliation? I don't think it needs to be that way. You could be nurturing and still motivate your students and subordinates to improve or work harder. Anytizers. As the movie goes on, both Vivian and Stromwell seem to come around to Elle. And vice versa. As Elle begins to excel in school, she not only gains Vivian and Stromwell's respect, but also begins to respect them more as people. Those superficial evaluations start to melt away. Vivian and Elle start studying together. Stromwell is impressed by Elle's answers in class. Elle softens in return. Her defense mechanisms no longer necessary. If Elle's relationships with Vivian and Stromwell hadn't improved, I guarantee she would have dropped out of Harvard. Stromwell, in the movie, is the only person who manages to convince Elle to stay in law school and continue with the case after Callahan harasses her. Not even Paulette or Emmett did that. As I mentioned, Elle gained respect for Stromwell, transforming her perception of her from evil professor into a genuine role model. Emmett's appeal doesn't work because as a guy, he just doesn't really get it. He might be sweet and definitely cares, but he's just a little naive. Paulette's appeal doesn't work because she's not involved with the law. But Stromwell has both of these things, and she points out that Elle is strong and Callahan is a stupid prick, which I love. Having someone in a position of authority who's likely experienced what she's experiencing, validate and encourage her just weighs more in her mind. Vivian does not have that same reaction. Witnessing the Callahan incident, Vivian mistakes it for consensual sexual impropriety. And actually bitches Elle out about it. Not one of her finer moments. Maybe it's just the fact that we live in a post-Me Too society, but I honestly can't conceptualize what would possess a person to say what she said after witnessing what she saw.
Well, maybe you should sleep with the jury too, then we can win the case.
Like, even if it were consensual, Vivian, why don't you just mind your business? This reaction throws a total wrench in their growing friendship and reveals that Vivian definitely harbors some sort of resentment, likely still from that same jealousy I talked about before. In any case, Emmett sets her straight in, frankly, kind of a hot way.
No, you don't even know what the hell you're talking about.
Okay, I don't know what I'm talking about either. Can you, educate me? Anyway, this conflict is really, like, the only part of the movie I genuinely dislike. This isn't gal pal behavior. But do you know what is gal pal behavior? The musical's version of this happy string of events. There's a really important change to the plot of the musical version. Stromwell is actually not in the play, so she's not there to tell Elle to get her shit together and get back in the game. Instead, Vivian witnesses the whole of what happens with Callahan, and she is instantly disgusted, telling Warner to shut up after he makes a nasty comment to Elle.
Looks like you'll make partner now. I mean, you really earned it.
Warner, shut up.
And later showing up at Paulette's salon to motivate Elle in the cutest way ever. To me, this is so much better. That was completely unintended. In any case, in both the movie and the musical, Elle and Vivian set aside their differences and become best friends, which is just very sweet. I also want to mention briefly, because it's just popping into my head, that the judge at Elle's big trial is also a woman. So I just think that that's interesting. And I just love that these professional type relationships build upon each other and really help Elle to excel in her career. Just like she has the support of her friends in the sorority and Paulette, she has two strong people in law who are there for her and gunning for her. I'm gonna argue that the male characters are tangential to the plot of the movie. Most of the time, the men in this movie just suck. Warner sucks, Callahan sucks, Emmett is a sweet guy, but he unfortunately lacks dimension. So let's start with the bastards, Warner and Callahan. Both of these men have the initial effect of essentially giving Elle the idea to achieve new goals. Elle is initially motivated to apply to Harvard simply to get access to Warner, but ultimately, he just insults her, which therefore motivates her to excel beyond him. And excel she does. He eventually loses all significance in her mind. She realizes her passion for law. He doesn't nurture or guide her the way that the women or Emmett do. He actually actively belittles her and shames her for even trying.
You're not smart enough, sweetie.
You rock, Warner. What sucks even more about Warner is that when she's harassed, he uses the opportunity to kick her down even further, insinuating that she's sleeping with Callahan for academic benefits. We already know that Warner is a genuine bitch by that point, but imagining how that might have felt if this were real. Someone that you were with for presumably a year or more, hoping to marry, witnesses your harassment, then decides it's cool to denigrate your hard work by essentially calling you a whore. Sweet. Not just that, but only after he decides she's worth it as a lawyer does he approach her to get back together. Huh? He's sick. Basically, Warner did absolutely nothing for Elle besides that initial motivation to get into Harvard. But honestly, he wasn't even responsible for that because he is just a bastard. Now for the head bastard in charge, Callahan. He doesn't have a first name, so in my head I'm just gonna call him Cherith. Cherith Callahan. The initial impression of Callahan is that he's the key to Elle's success as a lawyer. To be his intern is to lock in her future. Callahan is impressed by Elle's tenacity and uses his power to try to make a sexual advance. Good guy. It's just so fucking ugly and vile, and unfortunately it happens all the time. It's not movie magic. This scenario touches on an important point. Being sexualized in the workplace essentially makes you feel delegitimized professionally. Instead of Elle wanting to punish Callahan for his disgusting actions, she turns it on herself. She says that she's not good enough, that she's a joke. But really, Callahan's the joke. And a bad one at that. And not only that, he doesn't offer anything other than a professional opportunity, which she ends up carving out for herself and eventually cuts him out of. Both Callahan and Warner essentially provide impetuses for ideas for Elle, but nothing else, 'cause they suck. Anyway, back to something a little nicer. Emmett. Emmett is a kind-hearted and supportive man, miles ahead of the other two freaks I just described. However, Emmett seems deliberately one-dimensional. Maybe so they'd be able to package the movie as a rom-com, I really don't know. His characterization isn't necessarily something wholly captivating. He's just kind of there as a support, and I dig it. He's not the focus of the movie at all, which is another way that Legally Blonde manages to subvert expectations. In the musical, though, Emmett has a backstory that allows him to be there for Elle in a way that movie Emmett just isn't. As much as it pains me to say, movie Emmett is just kind of a depiction of how we praise men for just doing the bare minimum. Don't get me wrong, I still love him. Emmett has less of an impact on Elle than Stromwell in terms of getting her to stay after the Callahan incident. If this were really a rom-com, I would expect a grand gesture instead of him just whimpering, just stay.
Stay.
I mean, it's cute, but, you know, if it were a rom-com, he'd be fucking sobbing, like, please don't go, you're a good lawyer. Sorry, that was disgusting. Basically, I just think that the gal pals are a really sweet guiding force and an example of how we should all be as friends. You really can't underestimate the power of just being a supportive force in someone's life. It has untold positive results. The reason why I think it's one of the best examples of female friendship in film is because it really is just unabashed support. I feel like often in movies kind of similar to this with college girls or whatever, it just kind of tends to be people, like women tearing down other women. And I like to see something like this, where, you know, even the ones who do tear each other down do eventually kind of come to their senses and stop doing that. Maybe it is a little naive or reductive, but Legally Blonde shows us how silly it can be when we let sexual or romantic jealousy take over our real perception of another person. Legally Blonde subverts expectations in so many ways, but especially in the sense that it refuses to herald men as being the guiding force, carrying women through to professional success and life in general. When I was younger, Legally Blonde inspired me to be a lawyer. I really wanted it for a solid year, and instead, here I am, talking about the film directly to you.